So the NHL trade deadline is happening on March 8th. So we're 6 weeks out from the trade deadline. I'm going to be making a separate video talking about what I think the Leafs should have. But in this video, I wanted to talk about the 5 top prospects that the Leafs have. Some of which I think we should be trading. Some of them I think we should be keeping. So I just wanted to go over the 5 names of our top rated prospects as per me. I'm sure not everybody will disagree, so I would love to hear your comments in the comment box below as to who you would have rated and who you would be willing to part with. But the number 5 prospect on our list is Dennis Hildeby. The Hildebees are 22-year-old, 6'7", 234-pound mammoth of a goalie. He was drafted in the 4th round of the 2022. Oh, it's blocked by my face. 2022 draft. He came over from the Swedish Elite League at the end of last year. So this year is his first full-time year. So in the Swedish Elite League last year, he played 21 games and he had a .918 save percentage. And in the AHL this year, he's been our starting goalie down there. He played 19 games and he has a .909 save percentage. Nothing spectacular, but he is a very promising goalie, and I'm excited to see him. I know he got called up earlier the year when Samsonov was not doing well. He didn't play, but I'm sure he was happy to get an NHL paycheck. A lot of people I hear say, oh, they called him up and they didn't play him. I'm sure that player is so mad. Like, what the heck? When he's in the minors, he was making $82,500 a year. In the NHL, he was making 10 times that amount. So even if he was up for 1 week, just think of the difference in paycheck. It would have been substantial. I'm sure he was perfectly happy hanging out with the NHL players. I also wanted to just talk about, just like a little side note, Kyle Dubas did a really good job at stocking up our goaltending situation. We have Joseph Woll, we have Dennis Hildeby, we have Peksa, but we also have Artur Akhtiamov in the KHL. He's just an added bonus, also 4th rounder in 2020, and he has last year a .943 saves percentage in 39 games in the VHL, which is the league right under the KHL, which is the Super League in Russia. And he had a .952 save percentage in the playoffs in 6 games. So he went from a .943 to .952, which are unheard of. This year, he has a .921 in 12 games in the VHL and .921 as well in 17 games in the KHL. Those are really good numbers. If you look at all of his numbers, they're all .920s, .930s. Very impressive. I think Dubas has left us a pretty good goaltending stock. It's a very volatile position, so we'll see what ends up happening there. But we have a few different options. So I just want to give a little shout out to Akhtiamov. But number 5, Dennis Hildeby. Number 4, this is a take and a half. I don't think very many people are going to agree with this, but this is a player that's been on my radar over the past month or so and has really skyrocketed in my rankings, and that is Ryan Tverberg. Ryan Tverberg. He was our 7th round draft pick in 2020, 213th overall, so the last round of the draft. He is 21 years old, 5'10". It's listed 168. I think he's probably a bit bigger than that now. But he's a 21-year-old. Over the past 2 years, he played in the NCAA. He had 32 points and then 30 points in 35, 36 games with the University of Connecticut, which are good numbers, not amazing, but good. The NCAA tends to be a low-scoring league. Overall, pretty promising. But with the Marlies this year, so last year, at the end of the year, he played 7 games with the Marlies and donuts all around, 0 points, 0 goals. But this year, he's played 21 games with the Marlies, and he has 23 points and a plus-minus of 11. So he has over a point per game in the AHL. Not very many people do that, and very few 21-year-olds do that. So very interesting that he's putting up serious points in the AHL. So I'm actually really excited to see what he brings. I would not be surprised to see Ryan Tverberg make our team next year, whether it's the 3rd line, the 4th line. He's probably going to be waiver exempt next year as well, so he could go up and down. But I'm liking this player, and I read a little scouting report on Cap Friendly that was at the start of the year, September 17th. Unknown scout, But just gives you a little bit of perspective. It says, relentless competitor who brings a combination of energy, secondary, or depth scoring as a prospect, has the IQ to be used in various roles. He leans as a shooter more than a natural distributor, extends play battling along the boards and out in front of the opponent's net. He's a good skater, has added more explosiveness as he has matured. The fact that he can be used up and down the lineup makes him an attractive prospect to monitor. A full season in the AHL is required to define his NHL upside. So it hasn't been a full season in the AHL yet, but it's been 21 games that he's played, and he's definitely showing NHL upside. 23 points in 21 games as a 21-year-old, very rare. I would not be surprised if he ends up being moved at the deadline to get another piece back. We're looking for some pretty nice upgrades on our defense, and I could see a Tverberg being desirable to another team as a trade piece. I could also see us keeping him and rolling with him next year as well. So we'll see how it plays out. But he is my number 4 prospect in the Leafs organization, Ryan Tverberg. Number 3, we have Topi Niemela. He is our 3rd round draft pick in 2020. He is 21 years old. He is a 5'11". It's listed as 160. I believe last I heard he's 180. Right defenseman. He's a silky, smooth, puck-moving defenseman. I think it's the 2020-2021 season at the World Juniors for Finland, he actually received the defenseman of the entire tournament. So he was the best defenseman at the World Junior Championships in 2020-2021. He had 8 points in 7 games. So his stock raised from that. After that, in the next year, 2021-2022 season, in the Finnish league, he got 32 points in 48 games. Really promising for a young defenseman playing with men. Last year, his production dropped. In 58 games, he had 18 points, so it definitely dropped. He came over to the Marlies at the end of last year. He played 6 games in the regular season, got 2 points. In the playoffs, he got 5 points, and it was a +4 in 7 games. Really nice. So he's definitely continued on that trend this year. In 34 games, he has 22 points, 6 goals, 16 assists, and he's a +2. So he's looking as if he's putting up quite a few points in the American Hockey League. And I would not be surprised to see him on the Leafs next year, maybe a third pairing defenseman. A puck-moving right defenseman is something that we could utilize. We tried with Klingberg. That didn't work out. We are trying with Timmins. Keefe doesn't want to give him a proper shot. So maybe Topi Niemela. I can also see Topi Niemela being our number 1 trade piece. We have our 2024 first-round pick, and we have Topi Niemela. I believe those two are going to be our biggest trade pieces. We're looking for a big, physical right defenseman, preferably a right defenseman, and I could see a team wanting Topi Niemela back. They'll give us the defenseman that is ready right now, and we'll give him the defenseman that could be ready in the future. So that is, I'm assuming he's my number 1 trade target prospect. I would love to keep him. Time will tell how that plays out, though. So that's number 3, Topi Niemela. Number 2 on the list is Fraser Minten. I really like this prospect, really like this player. He is drafted in the 2nd round, 38th overall in 2022. He's a big boy. He's 6'2". I think he's listed as 192. He's growing, and he's only 19 years old. So Fraser Minten actually made the Toronto Maple Leafs this year out of camp. He had a great preseason, and then he played 4 games with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Ultimately, he was getting 10 minutes a game with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they thought it was best for his development to send him back down to juniors and to give him another year. But he looked unbelievable in training camp. So the thing about Fraser Minten is he's a big guy. He's a centerman. He is very smart, and he works extremely hard. And he plays a complete game. He's a full 200 player. He's very defensive-minded in that regard, too. And he's an incredible leader. So Sheldon Keefe mentioned that during preseason with actual Toronto Maple Leaf players, Fraser Minten on the bench was acting as a general. He was sitting there, organizing everything. He was acting as a leader, acting with actual NHL players as a 19-year-old. Sheldon Keefe was extremely impressed. And no surprise, as soon as he went back to juniors with the Kamloops Blazers, they immediately named him captain. He only had played 7 games with the Kamloops Blazers. He had 10 points in those 7 games, but they are a horrendous team this year. They lost all of their good prospects. Fraser Minten came back, and they immediately named him captain, and then immediately traded him. So they traded him over to the Saskatoon Blades, who's top of the league. So he went from bottom of the league to top of the league. He's had a little bit of struggle, point-wise at least, with the Saskatoon Blades when he first started. And then shortly after that, he got named to Team Canada for the World Junior Championships, where he actually got named team captain at the World Junior Championships as well. So after hearing Sheldon Keefe talk about Fraser Minten, it was not a surprise to me that Canada named him as a captain. I wasn't too sure because Team Canada, if you look at the list of players on that team, it was a bunch of captains. So Fraser Minten ended up being the captain of the captains, basically, is how that played out. That team struggled. They never really got a good flow. It's a short tournament, and they never really gelled. He ended up with 3 points in 5 games. But I think the whole Canada team was a bit underwhelming there. But he went back to Saskatoon Blades since then, and he's actually put up quite a few points. He's now up to 15 points in 12 games. I know before he went to the World Junior Championships, he only had a handful of points in 8 games or something like that. So he was well under a point per game, and now he's getting over a point per game. So he's definitely picked up his scoring pace since returning back to the Saskatoon Blades. Definitely a fragmented season. He hasn't really stayed long anywhere. He went from the Toronto Maple Leafs to Kamloops Blazers to Saskatoon Blades to Team Canada and now back to Saskatoon. So it'll be really interesting to see how things play out with Fraser Minten for the rest of the year. Hopefully he has a long, consistent stretch with Saskatoon and that they make a good playoff run as well. So that'll be interesting. In terms of trade potential, I think it's very unlikely that Fraser Minten gets traded. The one scenario that I could actually see him being traded is for a player named Boone Jenner, who Fraser Minten, I believe, that's his number one comparable in my mind. So Boone Jenner is the captain of Columbus. He's a really solid middle 6 player. Preferably number 3 center. He could play on your second line left wing. He could play second line center if you have an injury. And that's what I see the upside of Fraser Minten being. That really solid middle 6 guy. And that's where I see the upside. I think the likelihood of him being an NHL player is extremely high. So with some of these prospects, they have really high talent, but really unsure about their potential with the NHL. I think Fraser Minten will solidify himself in that middle 6 role, and it's very likely that he will make an impact at the NHL level in a pretty substantial margin in that middle 6. So I can definitely see the scenario where Columbus trades Boone Jenner. It's minimal, but if they do, they would want a first-round pick back, and they would want a centerman back as well, and that would be Fraser Minten. So a package surrounding a first and Fraser Minten for Boone Jenner would be interesting for the Leafs. It would hurt. It would hurt Columbus as well, but it's ultimately trading Boone Jenner now for a future Boone Jenner is kind of what that looks like. Either way, Fraser Minten, super high on this guy. He is my number 2 prospect on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, as for the number 1, we're going to go with Easton Cowan. He was our first round pick this past draft, 2023. 18 years old, 5'11", 185. He was kind of a shocker at the draft. He got picked 28th overall, and everybody was expecting him to go a lot later. The analysts, all the people on TV were like, who? Why? Where? Why is he getting picked now? And I think even the Toronto Maple Leafs were having that argument within themselves. But they're like, we really like this player. We need to make sure that we get him. And so far, they are being proven right, that they picked the right player at that time. So really, Easton Cowan picked up through the second half of last year. So with the London Knights, he ended up getting 53 points in 68 games last year. But it sounds like a lot of that happened in the second half of the season. Into the playoffs last year, they played 20 games, and he had 21 points in those 20 games. He's a relentless competitor. He's a full 200 guy. He can play the wing. He can play center. So he really took a step forward. But even with that, people were shocked at the 28th overall. Now, cue into this year, only a few months later in training camp, he almost made the Toronto Maple Leafs. Sheldon Keefe was super impressed with him. I think if he was not 18 years old, they would have put him on the Toronto Maple Leafs happily. They were super impressed with how hard he was working, how hard he was competing, and how well he was playing as well. It came as a shocker, but he stayed until the very last day of camp, and then they ultimately sent him back down to the London Knights of the OHL, where he has 55 points in 30 games. He's a plus 21. So 55 in 30 games is actually leading the Ontario Hockey League in points per game. He's only played 30. A lot of those guys have played 40, so he's leading in points per game. So this is the points per game list here. Easton Cowan, it's 183. I'm going to go over. Oh, you might not be able to see it. Let me move my face here. Let's go up to the top. So points per game, 1.83 points per game. Second is 1.78. So he's right at the top. You know, it just takes 1 or 2 games. He could be anywhere. Like, this could shift a little bit. But ultimately, he's right at the top of the Ontario Hockey League in terms of production at the moment, which is amazing. Okay, I fixed my face again. So any doubts that they picked the wrong, that they had picked the wrong person have been squashed. He clearly has been showing a lot of talent and a lot of skill, and he's clearly panning out. He also made Team Canada at the World Junior Championships. He only had 2 points in 5 games. Like I said, when we talked about Fraser Minten, very few people on the World Junior Championship team for Canada did much of anything. But ultimately, Easton Cowan is looking really solid. Fraser Minten, I said, has that middle 6 potential. Easton Cowan definitely has top 6 potential. He has like top line potential, even potentially. I just said potentially like 4 times in a row. We're going to leave it in. But he has that really high-end potential. Less likely to make to be there than Fraser Minten. Like, I think Fraser Minten's a lock to be in that middle 6 at an NHL level, where Easton Cowan, with these type of dynamic offensive players, you never know if they're going to just end up being a really good American Hockey League player or if they can actually solidify themselves in the NHL level. But he has that crazy high potential, and I'm really high on Easton Cowan. The likelihood of Easton Cowan getting traded, very low. So Easton Cowan, my number 1 on the Leafs board. So Easton Cowan, Fraser Minten, don't really see them being traded, or is very unlikely. It's possible, but unlikely. Topi Niemela, I believe, will be our highest possibility of being traded. Tverberg is my number 4. I'm excited to see what he has, and he may be traded as well. He could be as a trade piece. And then Dennis Hildeby, the Hildeby's in net as our number 5. That rounds it down. But like I said, March 8th, trade deadline. We will see after the trade deadline to see how many of these 5 guys are still remaining. I'm hoping that we have 3 of them. I'm hoping that we still have Easton Cowan, Fraser Minten, and Hildeby, at least. We'll see how it plays out. Either way, I so very much appreciate it. In the very coming days, I'll make a video about what I think the Leafs should do at the deadline. But until then, I hope you're having a wonderful time, a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in. Brian, the Leafs guy, out of here.